YouTube, what's good? It's your boy Richh, man. Today we're gonna be breaking down how to make an R&B melody from scratch. We doing the drums as well, the arrangement, the mixing. We getting into that thing, man. Something for somebody like Black, a real moody type vibe. So yeah, if y'all rocking with the video, man, drop me a like, drop me a subscribe. Y'all know the rules, man. If your head get the bobbing, you gotta drop the like, man. But hey, without further ado, let's get into this cook up. Alright, man, so we in FL, we at 75 BPM, key of F sharp minor. Hey, I finally figured out I can move my camera to the other side so I'm not covering up the velocity in the mixer. But anyway, man, yeah, so we got our first sound here. We are in the Prophet 5V VST from the Arturia collection. The sound that we have here is a pad called Embers. And this is what the melody sounds like. Simple. So what we did here is very, very easy. We basically just took these bottom notes here. We take all those out. All we have are triads. So I started with the first triad on the root note, which is F sharp, and we just built a chord from there. And we built that chord by placing a note, going up 2 from there, and then going up 3 from there. And that's our first chord. From there, we just built chords going down the scale. So from this F sharp, we went down to this D, built a chord there, went down to this A, and then came back up to the C sharp. Now with these extra notes here that I muted, all I did there were each of these notes is if I bring them up an octave here, you can see that. So with R&B melodies, you want to have good tension in the melodies. So it's almost like a trap beat in a, like, you know what I'm saying, the dark trap beats, how I say you have to play on the half steps, right? Those notes that are real close to each other. Well, with R&B, you're kind of doing the same thing almost. So as you can see here, I have these notes right on top of each other, and what that does is it creates a certain tension, like it gives it that feeling. So I put those notes down here, just one above the last note that it was. That sounded stupid. One note above the top of the chord almost. And I just pulled it down an octave, and that's an inversion. So technically the note would be right there, but we pull it down so it sounds a little bit differently. So that's what we did for these bottom notes here. All right, so I'm not the biggest on music theory, but these last 2 chords here, what I focused on going to the last 2 chords of this progression was it needs to resolve back into this first chord smoothly. So what I did here was essentially, if I bring this note back up, I took this same chord over here and I just duplicated it over here. So if I mute this B at the bottom and mute this F sharp here, you can see these are essentially the same chord. The only thing I changed was the note at the top. So from this A, I moved it down 1 semitone to this G sharp to give it a little bit of a darker feeling on this last half of the progression. So from there, I added this B, which if we bring it up, on this end, it would have just been this note right above this A. Here, it almost just builds out the full chord like a regular chord here instead of focusing on that tension. And then I just pulled it down an octave here. But I also did not want this chord to be so high. So what I did was I took the C sharp, instead of leaving it here, I decided to drop that C sharp down an octave as well to give it a little bit more bottom. It gives a little bit more emphasis there, a little more feeling, and that's really what I'm going for, the feeling of the melody. So we drug that down to give it a little bit more bottom, and then on the next chord, essentially all I did here was I took the B, I went up one semitone from there to the C sharp. I duplicated the C sharp down here again just to leave that bottom in there because I liked how it sounded. And then from there, we just took the same chord again almost. We just really moved this C sharp up and then dropped it down. So honestly don't know how I had it before. There we go. Something along those lines. So yeah, that's basically how we came up with this chord progression. And this is really the hardest part. Once you get your chord progression and it's a good chord progression, for these type of beats, man, that's really it. Because from here, we're just going to layer sounds. So let's get to the next one. All right, so we're in Prophet 5V again. And this is a pad called Everlast. And we are just layering the same exact chord progression. Nothing's even changing here. The only thing I changed, really, I shortened a few of the notes here. Just so it doesn't have as much of a tail on it. So this is what that sounds like. So the sound naturally kind of has a tail on it, so I just shorten those notes so it's not running into each other as hard. So yeah, with these type of beats as well, you really want to focus on your sound selection, because we're not doing so much with the melody other than layering the sounds. If you're picking great sounds, you don't have to put in a lot of effort here. It's really easy if you're just choosing good sounds that work well together. So that first pad I had was very open, very soft. And then this pad has a little bit more of that harshness to it, but it's also soft at the same time so that they blend very well together. So let me see if I can actually just play those two together so you can really hear what they sound like together here. You see, both pads have very good textures. They have textures going on, little artifacts in the sound that kind of play in your ear, but they blend very, very well together. So that's very key, man. So yeah, like I said, we really did not have to do too much here. We just layered the sound. All right, so we're in Prophet 5V again. As you can tell, we're going to be using this for basically the entire melody, except maybe two sounds later on down the line. But with these emulators of like these old synths, like the Prophet 5, you know, back then they didn't have, well, I mean, they kind of did, but if they were making a melody on an instrument, like they were probably going to use that same instrument for the entire melody. So I try to kind of lock in on that as well, because a little cheat code to sound selection is not going into a bunch of different VSTs to find sounds. If you stick to like one VST, that VST is built around usually a set of sounds that are going to sound pretty good together, because they want you to use that VST to make your entire melody more times than not. So if you stick in one VST, that's half the battle right there. So anyway, we have a lead here in the Prophet 5V, and this lead is called Fall, and this is what that sounds like. Beautiful, man. All right, so with this lead, if I mute these top notes, the way I started this pattern was with just the root note from the chords. So those are just the root notes from the chords. Now, what I did was, on top of that, a lot of times with like leads and VSTs, if you place a note in between a long note on the lead, sometimes it'll just naturally glide into that note. So I just kind of play with that. So when this D is playing and I put the A on top of it like that, it just kind of, on this one, it's not as much as a glide as it kind of more so jumps to this one. And then it goes back down to that D though, really cool. So I just kind of made a melody based off of that, how that's working. So I'm playing with the half steps, as you can see here, these notes that are next to each other, because it gives it that tension, it gives it that dark feeling, that moody feeling. And then we have a few of the notes sprinkled in between that just sound good to ear. So that's really all I was doing. I just played around with these notes going back and forth between the root note and these upper notes here. Now, a little trick you want with like leads, or like, you know, the catchy part of your melodies, you really want to have repetition. So here, the repetition of this melody is the half steps here, this A to that G sharp. We're just kind of going back to that. Even though the root note is dropping, we're still coming back to these notes here at the top. So that gives it that repetition. It makes it, it gives it a good little bounce. So. And then at the end here, what I did was, when I want to resolve the melody into the next note, what I do is I usually go one note below or one note above the note that's coming next. So here I went from this C sharp to this D. It just sounds good going back into it. And then on the other end, I resolved it going into this E, which goes into the D. So that's one note above D. This is one note below the D. So that's all I did there. Nothing too crazy. All right, so this is one of my more favorite sounds from this melody. It's a lead called Acidid Prophecy. Acidid Prophecy, I don't know. But yeah, we just took the same melody from the first lead and we copied it to this one. It's just a different texture, you know. The sound selection is what we're looking for here. So this is what that melody sounds like. Crazy, man. So yeah, real simple. It's the same as the last one. We ain't gonna spend too long on that. All right, so the next sound we have is a sub bass, same VST. This one is Got Some Bass. Got Some Bass. So here's the melody here. We're just following the root note of the chords again, but this time we're kind of playing with the octaves, moving the same note around, but just at different octaves to give it a good, nice, cool little bounce. So here's what that sounds like. Crazy. So like I said, for this one, all we're really doing, man, why are my shortcuts not working? Hold on. All right, man. So yeah, my shortcuts weren't working for some reason, but here we go. So all we're doing with this one, like I said, we're playing around with the octaves. So to give it a nice little bounce, I kind of just split the root note in half here, and I move it down an octave to give it a nice bounce. Same thing here, just move it down an octave, and then I'm just placing notes where I like the groove of the melody. On the second half, I want to switch it up a little bit to, you know what I'm saying, give it a little unique feeling instead of the same thing playing off of those inversions that we did. I decided to just add a little stab on the bass. Just to give it a little different feeling on the second half of that bass melody. Because our BPM is so low at 75, it's a lot slower. So these melodies can feel a lot longer with certain repetition. It might get boring. So just to kind of give it a different feeling underneath the beat. All right, so we finally switching to the VST here. We're going into Expand 2, one of my favorites. And we have the harp preset in the strings section. Oh God, please get this off my screen. All right, there we go. So this probably looks really crazy, but I promise it's not. All I did here was almost the exact same thing. I took the chords and I just kind of broke them up into individual notes, and I just kind of went up the scale and back down. I got the inspiration for this melody from, I don't know if y'all know the song Bedroom Boom by Yin Yang Twins, but they have this really cool like harp going in the background kind of, and that was kind of the inspiration for this melody. So that's what this is what that sounds like. It's beautiful. That's just beautiful, man. So what we have going on with that, like I said, we're kind of just going off the chords on the second half here. All I did was take the exact same thing, hold down shift, click on the melody or the note, it'll duplicate it, and then control and up on the arrow key. So if I duplicate it like that, control up on the arrow key, I just moved up an octave above it just to give it more of a layered sound, more, you know, make it more full on the second half. So that's all that's going on with that harp there. Now, as far as on the mixing, I did add a little bit of reverb here. Turned up the lows to take out the lows in the reverb. Turn up the highs to take out a little bit of highs there. We added some delay. As you heard, it was kind of, you know what I'm saying, it sounded really full and like it was moving all around. That's this delay is doing that. And I just EQ'd it a little bit to take out some of the low end. Then I also panned it a little bit to the left with this knob here. And I also stereo separated it a little bit with this knob here. So that's what's going on with the harp. All right, and the last melody we have is this fixture preset in the string section of Expand 2. And this is basically like a pizzicato string, so like a short plucky string, and this is what that sounds like. So with this melody, it's kind of really spaced out. By itself, it kind of sounds a little funny, but this was just playing off of the harp. So if I go to my full melody here and I play them both together, it'll sound a lot better. Because basically what I was doing was, with the harp, we're going up the scale and coming back down. And it's coming down into this pizzicato string that I added. So it's really just playing off of each other really cool. So you can hear it here. So that's called call and response, and that's all that we were going for there. Just a nice, like, kind of playing off of the two melodies to give it a really good vibe, good melodic bounce to it. So on the pizzicato strings, all I have is just some reverb, probably the same exact reverb from the harp, if I'm being honest. So yeah. So this is what our whole melody sounded like. Also, I just want to add, I didn't really go into the mixing of the other sounds because first of all, if you have good sound selection, you don't got to do too much mixing. You know, there's not really too much you have to do if you're picking the right sounds. Second of all, as you can see here, all I added was a EQ, taking out the lows on the sounds. I really did not put any other effects on them. Maybe a little reverb, and I'll show you this EQ a little bit. I had to take out some of the high end on that lead. Some of the lows here, boosted a little bit here. But nothing too crazy, man. Other than that, the only other mixing I did on the sounds was moving them around a little bit just to get, you know what I'm saying, move them around, have them in the right spaces, man. So nothing too crazy on the mixing of these sounds. So this is what our melody is sounding like all together. So yeah, man, that's what our melody sound like. So let's get into these drums. All right, man. So the drums. So I first started with this perk loop underneath the melody. So I'll actually like turn the melody back on, so you can hear. So that perk loop was sitting underneath the melody, giving it a nice groove, a good undertone. So that sets me in that mode, that vibe that I'm looking for. So from there, we start putting down drums. So first, we have this clap here. And what I did, let me show you actually the channel rack for this. This will help me explain a little better. So here, as you can see, we're at 75 BPM. So normally if we were putting down claps, we're going to be putting them on the 2 and the 4. So it'll sound like this. But instead, this is what I did. It's a little sauce here. I spaced them out like that, right? Now, what I did though was I actually took another clap and layered it with this clap. But this second clap on the sequencer here, the channel rack, it's gonna look a little weird. It's a little bit ahead of where it needs to be, right? So normally it would be right here. But what I did, the reason it looks like that is because in the actual piano roll here, I took the clap and I moved it a little bit ahead of where it quote unquote should hit if it was quantized. I moved it a little bit ahead because it gives it a nice swing, a good swing to it. So with those two claps together, this is what that sounds like. Because the reason I did that, the second clap, it has that like weird click at the beginning. That click gives it a nice texture. And with these type of beats, like sound selection, texture, those are the two main things, because you're trying to create an atmosphere for the artist. You're trying to create that vibe. Like, you know, you want to set a landscape for them where they can just do their thing, man, and get really crazy with it. And it's open and it just feels nice. So the texture of those two claps together, I just loved it. So that's what we did there. Next, we have this hi-hat, which is just a shaker. Now, what I did with this hi-hat, you can see a lot of it is off the grid, but that's on purpose. I played it on my MIDI keyboard here. I just tapped it in on the keyboard. You know, again, it's to give it that swing. So here's what that sounds like together. So you can hear some of those notes are off time, but again, we're looking for that swing, man. So on top of that shaker there, we have this other hi-hat, simple two-step, didn't do anything to it. So this is what that sounds like. Simple two-step pattern. It gives it that steady rhythm because we do have those elements of it that are off time. That simple two-step is just going to keep it, you know, a good rhythm. It's not too crazy. It's not getting too outside of being on time. Boom. So from there, I also added a snare, open hat, and another snare here. So with this snare, I'll do this one first because it's a little different. You hear that? It's just, it has a lot of reverb on it, a nice tail to it. Again, so I'm focusing on the texture and the soundscape, the atmosphere, man. So I had that snare on there, and then I also added this snare. Just kind of a more normal snare. It gives it the bounce. Well, you'll see kind of when I play it, but that snare is adding like a good bounce to it. So here's how this goes. Actually, let's start from here. You see that snare? That's adding that extra bounce to it. And there's that reverb snare. and you hear the two open hats. So let me show you those open hats since you heard them. So the first open hat that we have is this long open hat kind of, and I'm really using that one just to kind of accent going into a clap or snare. So you see it's right before the two, you know, right before really they hit. This other open hat here is just like almost like a triangle kind of. So yeah, I'll let you hear that again with everything. So I'm just kind of, I'm just playing with those open hats. I had the first open hat hitting first here, and then I have the second one playing twice before the first one hits again. It's just, you know, just bounce. I don't really know how else to explain that to you. So then the last drums that we have are the kick. So what I did with this kick here, I took two kicks, and I just, as you can see, kind of what I did with a lot of the drums on this one, I took one drum, took another drum of the same genre, like a clap and a clap, snare and a snare, a hi-hat and a hi-hat, for in this case the hi-hat and the shaker, and I take those two sounds and use them together to create a unique bounce and a different feeling. So it's really exemplified well with this kick, I believe. So the first kick I have sounds like this. Just a nice hard kick, like, love to hear it. The second kick sounds like this though. Real interesting. It's like almost like you kicking something hollow or something. I don't know. But together, this is what those kicks sound like. So with all the drums together, here's how this sounding now. Nasty. So you can see it just has a unique bounce to it because we're taking, and we did that with just about every sound. I didn't even really notice this until I'm breaking it down now, but we took two claps, played off of them with each other. We took two hi-hats, played off of them with each other, two kicks, two snares, and two open hats, man. I don't know how I do it. All right, now as far as the mixing on the drums, again, man, when you have good sound selection, you don't got to do too much. The perk loop, we just added an EQ just so that the perk loop doesn't have too much going on in it. Then from there, man, the drums, nothing. We have nothing on the drums. We just, the only thing I really did was I stereo separated the kick that was more hollow, just to give it a kind of a different texture to it. Put the main kick in mono, and we have the snare in mono here. Other than that, man, nothing too crazy going on. I did route the melody, the entire melody, to this melody bus here, and we have a Soothe 2 on it just to kind of take out any harsh frequencies in the melody. We have a sketch cassette just to add a little saturation and compression. We have it on the default setting here, and we have a fruity compressor to kind of just bring the melody all in together a little bit more. So let's see what the whole beat is sounding like, man. We're just gonna vibe out for a minute now. All right, YouTube, that's it for another one, man. I appreciate y'all coming through. We got it done. R&B beats, something a little different. I know I've been making these dark, hard trap beats, and you know, but hey, we had to switch it up a little bit, show the versatility. You know what I'm saying? So if you was rocking with the video, drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, and just keep on coming back, man, because the content gonna keep coming. You dig? But yeah, that's it. Hey, Richh with another one. We out of here.